The rain fell like a veil over the hills of Tuscany, turning the once green valleys into rivers of mud and sorrow. Dawn had yet to break, but the men of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team were already awake, crouched in shallow trenches, listening to the soft whisper of the wind through olive trees. Among them was a young soldier named Kenji Tanaka, a second-generation Japanese-American whose uniform was worn and stained, whose eyes betrayed neither fear nor doubt, but a quiet and steely resolve. He carried a photo of his mother tucked in his helmet, a reminder of the home he had left behind, of a family confined to barbed wire by the very country he now served. The world saw only a soldier in olive drab, a number among thousands, but Kenji carried something older, something intangible yet unbreakable, the spirit of the samurai. The morning was broken by a distant roar, the thunder of artillery rolling across the valleys like a warning from the earth itself. Men stirred, checking weapons, adjusting packs, eyes fixed on the misty horizon where enemy positions lay hidden. The 442nd had earned a reputation as the go-for-broke regiment, men who risked everything to save others, to prove their loyalty, to fight with unwavering courage. Kenji felt the weight of their history pressing on him. He was fighting not only for survival, but to honor a legacy, to protect his brothers in arms, and to prove that loyalty and courage transcend prejudice and suspicion. As the first rays of light broke through the clouds, the valley erupted in chaos. Machine gun fire stitched the morning air with death, and artillery shells tore the earth into jagged scars. Kenji pressed himself against the mud, feeling every vibration, every tremor under his boots, knowing that one misstep could be his last. Ahead, his squad was pinned down, trapped behind a ridge that offered no cover from the relentless hail of bullets. Communications were down. Reinforcements were hours away. In that moment, the battlefield was a crucible, and Kenji understood that courage was not a choice, it was a requirement. Memories of his father's words steadied him. "A blade is not for killing, my son. It is for protection, for those who cannot protect themselves." Kenji's rifle felt heavy in his hands, but the weight was nothing compared to the lives depending on him. Inch by inch, he crawled through mud and rain, bullets whistling past like angry hornets. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from responsibility, the unshakable knowledge that to hesitate was to fail not only himself, but every man relying on him. When he reached the ridge, he saw them. 3 German soldiers operating a machine gun, precise, methodical, their attention fixed on his squad below. Time slowed. Kenji gripped a grenade, counted silently, and threw. The explosion tore through the fog, sending smoke and dust into the gray morning. Charging through the chaos, he fired his rifle with steady hands, feeling each breath, each heartbeat, as though his body had become a living weapon. The gun fell silent. The nest was neutralized. His squad could move. When he whispered, "For my brothers, for my family, for honor," it was not bravado. It was a vow etched into his soul. The radio crackled to life. "Tanaka, report. Machine gun neutralized. Squad can advance." "Copy that. Good work, son." The words sounded hollow against the carnage, but they were enough to keep moving forward. By dusk, the ridge was theirs, claimed at a cost that no metal could ever quantify. Helmets, rifles, and bodies lay scattered across the field below, a grim reminder of the fragile line between life and death. That night, the survivors buried their dead beneath olive trees, lighting candles that flickered against the darkness. Kenji sat apart, staring at the stars, the weight of each life lost pressing on him. Corporal Diaz sat beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You saved us out there," he said. Kenji shook his head. "I just did what had to be done." Diaz smiled faintly. That's what heroes always say. Kenji did not feel heroic. He felt hollow, carrying the burden of survival as if it were a second uniform stitched around his ribs. In the days that followed, the 442nd continued their push through the Apennines. The terrain was merciless: muddy hills, narrow ridges, and forests that concealed death in every shadow. They were ordered to break through enemy lines to rescue an infantry division. It was another impossible mission, and once again Kenji found himself at the forefront, leading men through rain, fog, and fire. Each night he wrote letters he would never send, addressed to a mother imprisoned in an internment camp in Wyoming. I fight so that one day you can walk freely again. I fight so the world will see that we are Americans too. Each word weighed as heavily as the rifle he carried. The nights in the Italian hills were bitter, yet quiet moments persisted. Kenji often found himself staring at the stars, recalling lessons from his father. Rectitude, courage, benevolence, respect, honor, loyalty. These were the pillars of the samurai spirit, and though they had traveled oceans and centuries, they now guided him through mud, bullets, and fire. His squadmates too carried their private fears and memories, but together they formed a fragile yet unbreakable line. Every man depended on the other. Every step forward was a silent act of trust. One evening, the squad took shelter in a ruined farmhouse. Smoke from distant fires blurred the horizon. Inside, Kenji crouched with O'Neill and Diaz, watching the flames lick through broken windows. "We'll get through this," O'Neill whispered. "We have to." Kenji's fingers grazed the worn photograph of his mother. He whispered to himself, "We will survive. For them. For us." That night, as rain tapped against the roof, he allowed himself a rare moment of introspection. War had stolen innocence, yet it had forged courage. It had stripped life down to its most elemental choices: to fight, to survive, to protect, or to surrender. In the following days, the squad moved like shadows, crossing ridges and valleys while evading patrols and ambushes. Each step demanded vigilance, each breath measured against the threat of sudden death. When they encountered civilians, Kenji felt the weight of their suffering. Children hiding in cellars, women clutching whatever remained of their homes, elderly men staring blankly at soldiers who had arrived like ghosts. These were the silent witnesses of war, the unclaimed casualties whose stories were carried only in the eyes of those who had seen them. The 442nd's reputation grew with each engagement. Officers marveled at their resilience, their willingness to face impossible odds. Yet Kenji never considered himself a hero. Every day he saw death, heard cries, and carried the faces of the fallen with him. He learned that courage was not glamorous. It was grim, quiet, and unyielding. He learned that leadership was not about giving orders. It was about bearing the burden of responsibility for lives that trusted him completely. One particular night, as the squad huddled in a ruined chapel, thunder rolling across the hills, Kenji reflected on the contradictions of his existence. A Japanese American fighting in a war to preserve freedom for a country that had imprisoned his own people. A soldier tasked with saving lives while witnessing death unfold around him. And yet, in this paradox, he found a clarity deeper than any instruction manual. Honor was not in the medals or the flags. It was in action, in courage, in unwavering commitment to those who relied on you. As the rain eased and dawn approached, the men prepared to move again. Kenji's gaze lingered on the horizon where mist still hid enemy positions. He adjusted his pack, checked his rifle, and took a deep breath. Another day, another test. Somewhere in the mountains, death awaited, but so did duty, and he would not falter. Kenji did not yet know that the coming weeks would demand more than courage. They would demand ingenuity, self-sacrifice, and the full measure of the samurai spirit passed down through generations. Each decision would echo in the hearts of those he saved, each action a testament to the resilience of humanity even amid the most unforgiving landscapes of war. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, imagining his mother behind the barbed wire fences in Wyoming, imagining her faith in him, her silent prayers. And in that brief meditation, he made another vow, that no matter what horrors the next battle held, he would not allow fear to rule, nor inaction to betray his brothers. He would fight, not for glory, not for recognition, but because it was the only honorable choice left to a man carrying the soul of a samurai. The fog lifted, revealing the rugged beauty of the Italian hills, deceptive and merciless. Kenji led his men into the unknown,
their shadows stretching long over the muddy earth. Each step, each heartbeat, each breath was a silent affirmation. They would endure, they would fight, and they would live to tell the story. Dawn came quietly over the hills, but the world was far from peaceful. The mist clung to the slopes like a veil, hiding craters, shattered trees, and the bodies of men who had fallen in the previous night's fighting. The surviving soldiers of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team moved cautiously, boots sinking into mud, rifles at the ready, eyes scanning the shadows. Among them, Genji Tanaka carried the weight of responsibility for more than his own life. 8 men remained from his squad, tired, hungry, wounded, but determined. They were cut off behind enemy lines, isolated in a landscape that seemed determined to swallow them whole. Genji's mind was a constant rhythm of assessment. Every sound, every movement could mean death. A snap of a branch, the glint of metal in the distance, the faint hum of artillery far off. It was a language he had learned to read instinctively. His training, his father's lessons, the stories of ancient samurai, they all converged into a single guiding principle: protect those who cannot protect themselves, and never abandon honor even when survival seems impossible. By midday, they reached the narrow ridge overlooking a valley below. Through the mist, he could see German patrols moving with mechanical precision. Trucks carried soldiers and supplies, their headlights cutting through the fog. Any misstep would alert them. The squad crouched low, silent, barely breathing. The soldiers passed mere meters away, their boots crushing the earth in a rhythm that threatened to betray them. One lit a cigarette, and the small glow illuminated his helmet. Kenji's pulse throbbed, but he did not flinch. The patrol moved on, and relief was palpable, though fleeting. Each encounter with death reminded them of the fragility of life, the thin line between survival and extinction. Nightfall brought no comfort. Rain began again, relentless and cold. The squad found shelter in a ruined farmhouse, walls half collapsed, roof shattered. An old woman appeared, standing in the doorway, eyes wide with fear and recognition. "Americani?" she whispered. Genji nodded, and for a moment, humanity pierced the nightmare. She offered what little food she had, and for a fleeting hour, the men felt human again, fed, warmed, and reminded that the world outside war still existed. But the safety was temporary. By dawn, German soldiers discovered the farmhouse. Bullets tore through the structure, shattering glass and timber. Genji's rifle barked into the chaos, covering his men's retreat. Amid the screams and fire, he pulled the wounded Diaz behind the broken wall, refusing to leave him. The farmhouse burned, and the old woman lay lifeless. Genji could not save everyone, but he saved those he could, carrying the heavy truth of survival as a sacred burden. The following days were a gauntlet. They moved through forests and ravines, avoiding patrols and ambushes. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs, exhaustion seeped into bones, yet the bond between the men strengthened. Genji led with a quiet authority, never demanding, always guiding. They crossed rivers swollen by rain, crept along cliffs with sheer drops, and navigated trails that seemed designed by the earth itself to challenge their resolve. Each day tested them not only physically, but mentally and morally. Decisions became razor-edged. Fight or hide. Save one man or risk all. Trust strangers or face annihilation alone. During a night march, they encountered a small Italian village. Civilians watched from the shadows, eyes wary but hopeful. Genji considered their vulnerability. A stray shot could end lives he was sworn to protect. He motioned for silence and led the squad through the village, careful to avoid detection. Each footstep was deliberate, each movement precise. It was the essence of the samurai spirit: discipline, patience, unwavering focus. Death was all around them, but they carried a calmness born not of ignorance, but of acceptance and strategy. At one point, they were trapped on a narrow ledge overlooking a steep valley. German soldiers above, machine guns at the ready. Ammunition was low, and the men were exhausted. Genji's mind raced. Retreat was impossible. Attacking head-on would be suicide. He recalled the lessons of Bushido: courage tempered by wisdom, honor guided by duty. He spotted an overgrown path to the left, barely visible. Motioning to his men, they climbed silently, mud clinging to their uniforms, hearts pounding. Bullets whined past them, but the soldiers moved like shadows, guided by Genji's calm command. When they reached the top, exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them, but survival demanded forward motion. In a brief lull, Genji allowed himself to reflect. He thought of his mother, behind barbed wire fences in America, praying for the son fighting for a nation that doubted him. He thought of his father, whose words of honor and protection echoed in his mind. He thought of the men around him, brothers bound not by blood, but by the crucible of combat. Each life saved, each step taken through danger, was a testament to their shared humanity. The days turned into nights, each movement a calculated risk. The squad faced shellfire, rain, hunger, and despair. They were tested physically, mentally, and spiritually. Genji became the anchor for the men, embodying a calmness that was impossible to teach. Every decision was weighted with the lives of those who trusted him. When a comrade slipped into a trench filled with rainwater, Genji plunged in to pull him free, drenched and exhausted, refusing to leave him behind. That act of courage, repeated countless times, solidified his role not only as a leader, but as the moral center of the squad. By the end of the second week, the squad was reduced to 7 men. They had crossed valleys, forests, and ridges that were both beautiful and deadly. Each step forward was an act of defiance against fate itself. Genji understood that leadership was not about recognition. It was about bearing the responsibility of survival for others. Every night he wrote letters he could never send, chronicling their experiences, their losses, their courage. He wrote not for glory, but to remember, to honor, to preserve the humanity that war threatened to obliterate. On one night, they found shelter in a bombed-out church. The altar cracked, candles burning stubbornly in the damp. Genji knelt before the flickering light, hands clasped, whispering prayers for the dead, the living and those still trapped behind enemy lines. He thought about the lessons of the samurai: rectitude, courage, benevolence, respect, honor, loyalty. These were not abstract virtues. They were tools, guiding him through the chaos. He vowed silently that no man under his command would die due to hesitation, fear, or neglect. As the storm outside intensified, Genji gazed at his men, each one clutching his weapon, eyes wide but steadfast. They were weary, wounded, yet determined. The bond forged in the crucible of combat was unbreakable. Genji realized that the samurai spirit was not about individual glory. It was about shared honor, about placing the welfare of others above self, about carrying the weight of duty with unwavering resolve. By the following dawn, the squad moved again. They navigated treacherous ridges, forded icy streams, and evaded patrols that could annihilate them in an instant. Each successful maneuver reinforced the unspoken truth: survival was not luck, it was discipline, strategy, courage, and trust. Genji's leadership, calm and precise, inspired the men. They followed him not because they had to, but because they believed in his judgment, his honor, his commitment to them. As the sun rose over the Italian hills, a fragile hope emerged. Genji allowed himself a moment of reflection. They had survived impossible odds. They had endured hunger, fear, and relentless enemy fire. And yet the true test was not over. The mountains and valleys ahead still held danger, and the choices to come would demand the very essence of their courage. Genji knew that the coming days would define them, shape them, and leave an indelible mark on history. He adjusted his helmet, gripped his rifle, and signaled the men forward. Each step into the unknown was taken with quiet resolve, the spirit of the samurai alive in every movement, every heartbeat. For Genji and his squad, survival was not merely a matter of chance. It was a testament to honor, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond forged in the crucible of war.
The Italian sun rose blood red over the jagged hills, casting long shadows across a landscape scarred by fire, artillery, and the endless march of soldiers. Kenji Tanaka and his remaining squad of 6 had pressed through weeks of unrelenting combat. Each step forward a victory against exhaustion, hunger, and the ever-present specter of death. Yet the true test lay ahead. The mountains behind which German forces had fortified positions, a gauntlet designed to crush any who dared pass. Every ridge was a knife's edge, every valley a trap. Kenji knew that to lead his men through this crucible would demand the full measure of the samurai spirit, tempered by the cunning and resolve of a man who had already stared death in the face too many times to count. The morning was deceptive, cloaked in mist that blurred the line between safety and danger. As they moved along a narrow ridge, Kenji's eyes swept every inch of terrain, noting the position of trees, rocks, and craters that could conceal enemy fire. He recalled the lessons of his father, of the Bushido Code, of the unbroken discipline of warriors whose lives had long been guided by honor. It was not enough to survive. One must act with precision, protect those under one's charge, and preserve the values that define them. Each soldier in his squad carried not only a rifle, but a story, a fear, and the hope of someone waiting for their return. Kenji bore these invisible weights as if they were chains across his shoulders, but chains that strengthened rather than bound him. Suddenly a machine gun burst shattered the fragile quiet. Bullets tore through the earth around them, spraying dirt and rock. The men dove for cover, hearts pounding in unison. Kenji counted 5 enemy soldiers positioned above them, their vantage point near perfect. Retreat was impossible. Every path was either exposed or mined. Kenji's mind worked with a cold, calculating clarity. He motioned to Diaz and O'Neill, whispering directions that carried the weight of life and death. Together, they executed a maneuver that seemed impossible. One soldier drew fire while the others moved along the ridge, silent and precise, inching closer to the enemy. Kenji's pulse raced, but his hands were steady. Each shot he fired, each movement he made, was deliberate, embodying the samurai principle that courage without strategy is meaningless. By midday, the ambush had been neutralized, but not without cost. One of the men, Tanaka's closest companion, had been struck in the leg. Kenji tore a strip from his own uniform to bind the wound, muttering reassurances that barely masked his own fear. Each life was precious, and each act of care was a defiance against the brutality surrounding them. The squad pressed on, navigating steep cliffs and dense forests, where visibility was near zero. Rain began to fall again, turning the trails into rivers of mud, and making every step a struggle. Kenji led from the front, embodying the principle that true leadership is to share every risk, every burden, every danger. That night, they found shelter in the hollow of a collapsed barn, the remnants of walls providing the barest protection from the storm and enemy patrols. Around a small flickering fire, Kenji allowed a moment of rest. The men were silent, exhausted, haunted by the memory of those they had lost. Kenji wrote in his journal, documenting each day, each action, each decision, knowing that this record would serve not for glory, but as testimony to the courage
and suffering of those who endured alongside him. He wrote of strategy, of ambushes, of near escapes, and of the moments when humanity, fleeting and fragile, shone through the darkness of war. In the early hours, they moved again, shadows against the mountain. Visibility was almost zero, the mist thickening to the point that one could see only a few feet ahead. Enemy patrols were everywhere. Every sound could be the prelude to death. Kenji stopped frequently, listening, assessing, guiding. He developed signals for movement, gestures that conveyed warnings or instructions without a single word. The men had grown to trust these silent cues, a language forged under fire, where one mistake could mean obliteration. The samurai spirit was alive in every action: patience, precision, discipline, and the unwavering will to protect those under his command. Hours passed with no sign of the enemy. Then a sudden explosion rocked the ridge. A hidden mine had detonated, and one of the men was thrown several feet, blood staining the mud. Kenji rushed forward without hesitation, pulling the soldier to safety, applying a field dressing with hands that shook not from fear, but from urgency. The squad pressed on, each step measured, every decision critical. There was no room for error. Each man relied not only on skill and instinct, but on the unwavering trust that Kenji inspired. Their survival was interwoven, a tapestry of courage, loyalty, and precise action under imaginable stress. By midday, the squad approached the ridge overlooking a strategic valley. German artillery positions were visible, camouflaged yet deadly. Retreat was impossible. Advancing would require ingenuity and audacity. Kenji considered every option, then made a choice that would define the remainder of their journey. He ordered a feint. A small portion of the squad would draw attention, while the others maneuvered to flank the artillery. Bullets ripped through the air as the plan unfolded. Kenji led the charge himself, moving with calculated precision, firing only when necessary, always aware of the lives that depended on his calm and courage. By nightfall, the enemy position had been neutralized, though their own numbers had dwindled and fatigue weighed heavily on every soldier. In the quiet aftermath, Kenji allowed himself a rare reflection. He thought of the paradox of his life. A Japanese American fighting for a country that had interned his family, risking his life to defend principles that had not always protected him. Yet he also felt pride, not in conquest or glory, but in the unwavering bond between him and the men who had survived beside him. They had endured the impossible, survived ambushes, mines, artillery, and exhaustion, and had done so together. The essence of the samurai was not in swords or titles. It was in action, courage, and loyalty under fire. The next morning brought another challenge. A mountain pass, narrow and exposed, awaited them. German snipers had established positions on the ridges, and the squad's supplies were nearly exhausted. Kenji scouted ahead, noting every rock, tree, and shadow. They moved in single file, each man relying on the other, each step a risk. The sniper fire was sudden and relentless. Kenji directed his men with quiet precision, coordinating movements that minimized exposure. One by one, they crossed the pass, bullets whizzing past, hearts pounding, bodies trembling. Every life save felt miraculous, every success a tribute to discipline, trust, and courage. That night, the squad rested in a ruined monastery, candlelight flickering against broken walls. Kenji wrote again, recording not only the events, but the thoughts, fears, and reflections that the war had etched into his soul. He pondered the duality of his existence: Japanese by blood, American by duty, fighting for freedom in a land half a world away from home. The war demanded everything, yet it also revealed what lay at the core of humanity: the capacity for courage, loyalty, compassion, and sacrifice. Kenji understood that every man he saved, every life protected, was a manifestation of the soul of the samurai he carried within him. As they prepared to move again, Kenji reflected on what lay ahead. The battles were far from over, and the path to safety would demand even greater courage. He adjusted his pack, checked his rifle, and signaled his men forward. Each step was deliberate, every heartbeat measured. They were a team forged in the crucible of combat, bound by trust, discipline, and an unbreakable sense of duty. The mountains were merciless, the enemy relentless, yet they pressed on. Survival depended on strategy, courage, and the unwavering spirit that had guided Kenji from the first day on the Italian fields. The journey continued, each day a test of endurance and courage. Kenji led his men through enemy territory, facing ambushes, mines, and treacherous terrain. Each successful maneuver reinforced the importance of trust and the samurai principles that guided his actions. Rectitude, courage, benevolence, respect, honor, loyalty, they were no longer abstract virtues, but the framework of survival. His decisions, each one critical, reflected not only the lives of his men, but the legacy of every soldier who had fought before them, every human who had ever stood against overwhelming odds. By the end of the third week, the squad had navigated nearly impossible terrain, survived ambushes, and endured both physical and emotional torment. Kenji's leadership, calm under pressure, had preserved the lives of men who might have otherwise been lost. The cost was evident in every exhaustion-lined face, every bandaged limb, every silent prayer whispered into the night. And yet, despite the suffering, a bond stronger than fear had emerged. They were not merely soldiers. They were brothers, united by trust, courage, and the shared experience of facing death together.
The hills of Italy had become both enemy and mentor. Every ridge, every ravine, every shattered village told a story of struggle, loss, and resilience. Kenji Tanaka and his remaining squad pressed onward, knowing that the final stretch would demand more than courage. It would demand absolute devotion, strategy, and the unbreakable will to survive. The enemy was everywhere, hidden behind crumbling walls, in forests, and even within the very mist that clung to the mountains. Each step was a test of nerve, each breath a gamble. And yet Kenji moved forward with the calm precision that had defined his leadership from the very beginning. By midday, they reached a narrow pass flanked by jagged cliffs, a place where any misstep could mean death. German forces had established fortified positions here, machine guns ready, snipers watching every approach, and artillery zeroed in on the path below. The squad stopped, pressed against the mud and rock, hearts racing. Kenji scanned the terrain, noting the glint of helmets, the motion of fingers on triggers, and the faint vibrations of distant artillery. He whispered to his men, giving silent cues and instructions, his eyes a beacon of focus and determination. The samurai spirit was alive in every motion, every glance, every decision. The first challenge struck without warning. A hail of bullets erupted from a ridge above, slicing through trees and dirt, forcing the men to dive for cover. Kenji assessed quickly. Retreat was impossible. Advancing straight would be suicide. He spotted a small ravine to the left, partially concealed by trees and fog. "Move on my mark," he hissed, signaling the squad. With synchronized precision, they shifted position, moving like shadows across the mud and rocks. Bullets whizzed past, some striking perilously close, but each soldier trusted Kenji's calm judgment. Inch by inch they advanced, surviving on instinct, discipline, and the unwavering commitment to one another. As they approached the enemy positions, an explosion rocked the mountainside. One of the men, injured earlier, was thrown against a rock, blood flowing freely. Kenji did not hesitate. He leapt forward, dragging him to safety while directing covering fire with his free hand. The chaos was deafening, yet his mind remained clear. He calculated angles, measured distances, and coordinated movement like a conductor directing an orchestra, each action deliberate, each moment critical. Survival depended not on luck, it depended on strategy, courage, and the discipline that had been honed through weeks of relentless combat. Night fell, bringing temporary reprieve, but no real safety. The squad huddled within a ruined stone structure, rain seeping through cracks in the roof, and exhaustion weighing heavily on every man. Kenji allowed himself a moment of reflection. He thought of his mother, imprisoned unjustly in America, her silent prayers guiding him across oceans and battlefields. He thought of his father, whose teachings of honor and protection had become a compass for every decision. He thought of his men, weary and battered, yet unbroken, whose lives depended on his courage and judgment. The samurai spirit, he realized, was not about personal glory. It was about responsibility, loyalty, and the relentless pursuit of duty in the face of unimaginable odds. Morning brought a fresh challenge. The squad encountered a series of trenches, camouflaged and bristling with enemy fire. The only way forward was a direct assault, yet Kenji's mind raced for a safer path. He led his men through a hidden ravine, using the terrain to mask their movement. Sniper fire struck dangerously close, forcing them to move with the utmost caution. Every step was calculated, every movement a delicate balance between risk and necessity. When they finally reached a vantage point overlooking the trenches, Kenji devised a plan to neutralize the positions without sacrificing a single life. He divided the squad, coordinated covering fire, and led the assault with a mix of bravery and tactical genius that left even the enemy in awe. The attack was brutal, yet precise. The squad moved like shadows through mud and smoke, neutralizing enemy positions with minimal casualties. Kenji's leadership shone brightest in moments like these, calm under pressure, aware of every detail, and carrying the lives of his men as though they were an extension of his own. When the last enemy position fell, the squad paused, catching their breath and surveying the field. Bodies lay scattered, some friend, some foe, a grim reminder of the cost of war. But they had survived, and the path to safety lay open, though still treacherous. The journey continued, each step a testament to endurance, strategy, and the unyielding bond between men. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs, wounds throbbed with pain, and sleep was a luxury they could not afford. Yet they moved forward, driven not by fear but by responsibility, to themselves, to their fallen comrades, and to the principles that defined them. Kenji's calm, disciplined leadership was a beacon in the chaos, guiding his men through terrain that would have broken lesser soldiers. Each decision was weighted with consequence, each action a balance between courage and calculation. As they neared friendly lines, the enemy intensified their efforts to stop them. Artillery rained down, machine guns tore into the landscape, and ambushes waited at every corner. Kenji adjusted constantly, directing movement, calculating risks, and inspiring his men to act with precision. Every encounter tested not only their physical strength, but their moral courage. To falter meant death. To act without thought meant disaster. Yet under Kenji's guidance, the squad moved with the discipline of warriors whose souls had been tempered by adversity. The samurai code lived in every motion: courage, rectitude, honor, loyalty, and the protection of those under one's care. Finally, after days of relentless struggle, the squad reached the safety of Allied lines. Exhausted, mud-streaked, and bloodied, they emerged from the mountains not just as survivors, but as a testament to resilience and unwavering courage. Commanders marveled at their endurance and the leadership of Kenji Tanaka, a young Japanese-American soldier who had guided his men through hell itself. For the squad, the return to safety was bittersweet. They had survived, but at a cost that would forever weigh on their souls. Every life lost, every friend left behind, was a shadow that would remain long after the war ended. Kenji, however, carried no desire for recognition. The true reward was in the lives preserved, in the men who could return to their families, and in the enduring honor of duty fulfilled. He thought again of his mother, of his father, and of the countless lessons that had guided him through the chaos. The samurai spirit was not about accolades. It was about action, responsibility, and unwavering integrity in the face of impossible odds. And in that moment, Kenji understood the deepest truth of all. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph of duty over hesitation, the relentless pursuit of honor in a world determined to crush it. In the aftermath, stories of the 442nd spread, accounts of bravery, sacrifice, and extraordinary heroism that transcended prejudice and history. Kenji's squad, once diminished, became emblematic of courage under fire, a living testament to the principles of the samurai applied to the modern battlefield. Letters arrived from families, expressions of gratitude and pride that momentarily softened the scars of war. Yet Kenji remained humble. He knew that every act of heroism was built on the foundation of trust, loyalty, and collective courage. No man acts alone, and no hero survives without those who stand beside him. Years later, Kenji would recount the events in hushed tones, careful not to glorify violence, but to honor the human spirit. He spoke of the mountains, the ambushes, the nights of rain and mud, and the silent moments when survival depended on calm, precise action. He spoke of his men, each one a brother, each life precious and irreplaceable. And in every story, he carried forward the essence of the samurai: courage in adversity, loyalty to those under their care, and unwavering dedication to duty even when the world seemed to determine to crush the spirit of men. The legacy of Kenji Tanaka and his squad was not measured in medals or headlines, but in the lives saved, the principles preserved, and the enduring spirit that transcended both war and prejudice. They had fought not only for survival, but for the values that define humanity: honor, loyalty, courage, and compassion. They had demonstrated that the soul of a samurai could exist in any place, in any time, and that true heroism is measured not by the battles won, but the lives preserved and the integrity maintained amid unimaginable adversity. And so, as the Italian sun set over fields once drenched in blood, the men of the 442nd walked forward into history. Mud-caked, exhausted, yet unbroken, they carried with them the proof that courage is timeless, that loyalty is eternal, and that honor is forged not in glory, but in steadfast action when the world demands it most. Kenji Tanaka, the soldier with the soul of a samurai, had led his men through hell and back, and in doing so left a legacy that would echo through generations, a testament to the indomitable human spirit, and a reminder that even in the darkest hours, courage, honor, and loyalty endure.